On my father's birthday, everyone delivered the verdict that this house was no longer mine. I did not object. But when the papers were read, that same day proved to be the longest for them, because the real owner's name had come before everyone. It was said before the cake was cut. The candles were still burning. Happy birthday had barely ended when my older brother cleared his throat and said, "We've made a decision." There was no celebration in that sentence, only command. Without looking directly at me, he continued, "This house isn't yours anymore. Dad needs rest and we need to keep everything simple." No one in the room looked surprised. It felt as if they had all been waiting for this exact moment. I didn't object. I stared at the slice of cake on my plate and stayed quiet. The house sat in an ordinary New Jersey suburb, 2 stories, white siding, a small front lawn I had mowed for years. This was the house where I had brought my father home from the hospital, where I had organized his medications by day and color, where I had spent countless nights half asleep on a chair outside his bedroom after his stroke. After my mother passed away, it was just the 2 of us. Yet that afternoon, all of those memories were suddenly treated like they belonged to someone else. My father sat silently in his chair. His health was no longer what it used to be. Since the stroke, he spoke less, moved slower. My siblings had their own homes, their own schedules, their own carefully balanced lives. I had quit my full-time job and shifted to freelance work so I could stay with him. The bills had piled up, but I never asked anyone to settle accounts. I had assumed this was my responsibility. I had assumed it was understood. "You get it, right?" my sister said, her voice coated with artificial softness. "This is just practical." I nodded. I knew that if I spoke, the moment would splinter. Over the years, I had learned that silence often prevented conflict, at least in the moment. So I swallowed what I felt and let the conversation move on. The cake was cut. Photos were taken. The subject changed. But inside me, something hardened like a sudden freeze. It felt as if the floor had been pulled out from under my feet. I cleared dishes, folded napkins, focused on small tasks the way a child does when the world feels too large. No one asked where I would go. Perhaps they assumed I would figure it out the way I always had. 2 weeks later, the lawyer arrived. "Just a formality," my brother said casually. Papers were placed on the table. I sat to the side with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The lawyer began reading, deed, trust, dates, names. The words floated through the room, distant and heavy. Then he stopped, adjusted his glasses and looked again. "One moment," he said. Everyone's attention snapped to him. In a clear, measured voice he continued, "The actual ownership of the property." And then he read my name. Fully. Curry. The same name I had heard all my life but never spoken with that kind of authority. The air in the room stalled. My brother blurted out, "That's not possible." My sister laughed, but the sound collapsed halfway through. The lawyer slid the document forward. "This deed is 15 years old." My father lifted his head for the first time that day. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "I saw everything," he said. "I knew who stayed. I knew who carried the weight." There was no anger in his tone, only fact. A fact everyone else had chosen to ignore. That day stretched endlessly for them. Questions turned into arguments. Phone calls were made. Voices rose and fell. No one spoke to me directly, as if I had suddenly become invisible. Yet my name, printed in black ink, had changed everything. I said nothing. I signed where it was required and let the room keep its noise without me. This wasn't revenge. There was no scheme behind it. I hadn't hidden anything. I had simply done what felt right, stayed, managed, paid, endured. My father had noticed what others hadn't. Perhaps he had decided long ago what fairness looked like. Perhaps he understood the cost of silence better than anyone. Afterward, relationships didn't become easier. My brother said I had taken advantage. My sister said I could have spoken up sooner. I replied, "You wouldn't have listened." The words weren't sharp, just tired. They carried years of being overlooked, years of choosing peace over explanation. I didn't sell the house. I repaired it, updated what I could, rented out a couple of rooms. I turned my freelance work into something stable. One neighbor told me, "You saved this place." I smiled and said, "It saved me." It wasn't a grand victory. It was simply room to breathe. A few months later, my father passed away. His last words to me were, "You never made noise, but you stayed strong." I held his hand and for the first time allowed myself to be fragile. Even now I clean the same house. I mow the same lawn. The difference is that I understand something I didn't before. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is what allows truth to speak at the right moment. And when truth finally speaks, even paper bears witness. If this story touched you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more real, honest stories to life. Share it with someone who's quietly working on themselves. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for valuing strength that grows in silence.